Hello, hello, hello. Good morning. We are in the train station and it's raining cats and dogs. Well, no, not dogs, only cats. Can you hear this? This is the train. There's the sound of the rain then. It's early in the morning and we are going to Milan for the first time in this 2025. Welcome back to a Pup in the Life, the podcast, the only podcast where a dog is the host and speaks to y'all peeps. So, in today's podcast, you are probably aiming too low. Now, what does this really mean, in fact? So, we're having this pretty interesting conversation that I actually was overhearing Mom having with somebody. That was trying to cater to the scale of the business, which basically boils down to this. Once you start the process of scaling a business, really it goes towards something that entails new challenges that you haven't had before if you hadn't scaled the business before. Now, it also depends on the sector, but it mainly relates to the evolution of things that just require a new scale, very, very different than the one you were used to. Now, what does this really, really mean? This means that once you start building something and you start validating the idea, you're at scale 0. Then you might be soft launching, testing the product, you might be at scale 1. You then might be at scale 2, where your product actually is getting bought by early users. Then you have level 3, where you are starting to see how other users are following the first users. But then you have scale 4, where the evolution of the business is not doing a further 100K in revenue, 150, 250. It's like getting to 1 million. And then there's going to be a fourth scale where it's not going to be doubling from 1 million to 2 million. It's going to be doubling from 1 million to 10 million. Now, this might sound very absurd. This might sound too big to be true. It might sound fancy. You can say about it all you want. And in a market such like Italy, for example, it's quite easy to get caught on such type of understatements, just because it's a tiny market, and mainly we're used to thinking in small. And I think Americans, for example, have this better because the market is so huge. They know how to exactly deal with such type of things. But nevertheless, or China or Russia. I mean, I'm talking like big countries, or countries where they speak a language that's spoken by many people, like French or English or Spanish, English itself or Spanish. So we need to break free from this tiny mentality, which doesn't really mean that thinking small is wrong. It's just at some point it no longer serves you. It no longer serves you, and it doesn't mean you're going to build a unicorn of a company. It means you're going to try to build something that scales one step further. And in all honesty, once you have reached a point, you shall not try to make it better. You should try to do it exponentially, and this is if you're building a startup. If you're not building a startup, it's fine. You're trying to build something different with totally different logics. And it's not wrong. It's just not a startup. So we've all heard this blitz scaling thing. All this ways of talking about scaling a company. And I don't want to give like tactics to it. I'm just saying because I don't know, and it would be wrong. And I hope we can stay longer in this podcast to know what this is all about. I am just saying that when it comes to fixing your own mentality as a CEO, this is probably the first thing you should look at, is trying to understand that thinking in the way you thought before, so setting objectives as you thought before, trying to hire the people that you hired before, trying to get to companies the way you got them before, communicating and branding the way you did before, it's actually not going to work simply because you're trying to do something different. And how can you find the same results if you do the different results, sorry, if you're doing the same shit? Now, this might sound obvious, but trust me, it's not. And so in today's podcast, I just want to share that I overheard mom talking about this, and it was really compelling because I thought, how many people just get lost in something that's so easy to understand, yet very difficult to plan and very difficult to execute? That is just thinking that the same framework is working at a different level of scale, where in fact it's not. And it might be a harder work to do for people that work in tinier markets, for example, that just like mom is not so how can I say, outspoken in terms of selling shit that doesn't exist or selling a dream way before. But that's the only way to do it, is to frame the thing in its potentiality and, yes, showing traction. But if you're not able to sell it on the future of it, and I mean, not only to investors, but also to clients potentially, you are not going anywhere, simply because you have just your traction. And it's a very good traction, but it's never going to be enough if you don't change the way you're thinking. Now, this might sound very motivational shit, very, 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 very easy talk, but in fact it's not. And it's a work of psychology that then needs to be pushed into co-founders, into C-levels, into managers, into all the people in the company. And in fact, it's a one or the other way. It's either in or out in this, because there is no other way for you to really be able to create something that scales if you don't change. If your mentality doesn't scale. Now, big part of that is the podcast that we did yesterday about having somebody to talk to. Not always easy. Not always obvious, actually not never obvious. It's very hard to find somebody that also is willing to share. Not everybody has the same flavor, the same character, so it's totally normal that this happens. But in fact, what we have and what we see is you need to understand that there is no point in thinking in the same way, simply because it wouldn't work. It's not gonna work. You might land on a very good deal, a very amazing deal that solves your problems for the moment, but it's not gonna happen overnight. And it's just one single shot, which I wouldn't base my company on. So to scale, you need to scale your mentality first, your mindset, the way you think, and the way you roll. Now, our trade is here, so I will talk to you Monday. Have a happy weekend. I'm sending you kisses, hugs, and a bit of barks. Bye!